Welcome to Life by Design for Chiropractors, episode 115.
Welcome to Life by Design, the podcast for chiropractors. Here's your host, Dr. Jamie Richards.
Welcome to Life by Design for Chiropractors. I'm your host, Dr. Jamie Richards. On today's episode, I'm joined by my colleague, Dr. Kreso. We answer one simple question. If we could go back in time and tell ourselves one thing 15 or 20 years ago that would make the biggest impact today, what would that be? I know for many of you who listen in, it's probably the exact same thing. And for many of you, you need to be telling yourself this right now. So I know you're going to get a lot out of today's episode. We'll share with you our experiences and why we think for each of us uniquely, what we said was the most important thing that we would let ourselves know. Of course, check out the link in the show notes, Life by Design for Chiropractors Training Camp. 4 spots left. We're going to shut that down soon. A to Z retention-based practice training. Everything you'll need to know to start implementing on Monday morning. So take a look at that link and enjoy today's episode of Life by Design for Chiropractors. Kreso, welcome to Life by Design for Chiropractors.
I'm excited. I heard I was going to be asked the question and I wouldn't even have time to think about it. I just had to blurt out an answer.
Well, the answer might take you longer to discuss. But for those people who are not watching on the video feed here for today's podcast, we have a special guest with us. Who's our special guest? You want to say hello? Say hello.
Hi.
There you go. That's my daughter, Andy. She's joining us for the podcast today, Daddy Andy Day. And Andy's drawing a wonderful picture of a rabbit. She's quite the artist, actually. So today we're talking about one thing I'd tell my future self. So that's the question, Kreso. We're talking about our practice, our business, our life, for that matter. I am cheating in a sense because thinking of the question, I did actually come up with an answer myself. So, I'm a little ahead of you on that sense. But I think for funsies, as you're thinking about it, why don't we just let you jump and catch you right in this moment, fast forward or go back, go back to when you started practice, say 15 years ago. And now you're yourself today. If you, were able to have kind of thought back in time, what would you have told your future self? Or I guess, what would your future self tell your prior self, I guess, is really the way to frame it.
Okay, that's what I was going to ask you.
Which I guess my point was, in a sense, what would you tell yourself now to the future? Because it's probably the same thing. Or maybe it's not the same thing. Maybe it's two different things. I don't know. That's what would you go back and tell yourself to tell you in the past?
I would tell myself to work on developing confidence and self-esteem in myself, right?
That's just one thing.
Oh, just one thing.
One thing. So you got to think about this. What's the one thing you would say, okay, I'm going to go back. I'm going to see myself in practice in year 1 or 2. What's the one thing that I would tell myself that would have the biggest impact in terms of where you are today?
It's going to be okay.
It's going to be okay. Can you elaborate on that and share some of the backstory and why that's the one thing?
Yep. So, you start, and I mean, really now when I look at it, starting in practice was this whole big journey of like entrepreneurship and actually, having a vision for what I wanted, not just my future, but my community's future to look like. And we just had a conversation around this. You don't realize the effort and the amount of work and the amount of skill and knowledge and dedication that it takes to actually take this out of your brain and make it real in the world, right? Mm-hmm. Like nowadays we call this the entitlement mentality. People think that they can just snap their fingers and all these things are going to happen. So if it's your first time going through this, there's these periods where you're met with, I don't have the skills. I'm a failure. At least I was. I suck at this. This is never going to happen. And it's during these times and the lack of confidence in yourself where you're actually, because you're thinking it, this is where your vision starts to falter because you're not doing the things necessary in order to create that vision that you want. So now when that happens, it's like no big deal. Like you expect it, right? Like we're creating things now all the time. And when like setbacks happen, you're like, like this whole COVID thing, like this put a big dent. Not just financially, but like vision wise, we couldn't see people. You're like, oh my God, who's going to come back? Is their health going to suffer? Like all these concerns. But if this was like 10, 15 years ago, it would have been, well, I'm a failure. I suck. I'm not doing the right thing. Now it's like, well, this is just the next bump in the road, right? Like, I don't doubt myself anymore. It's just like, well, crap happens. We'll just keep moving. I trust, right? Like, it's going to be okay. I trust myself. I know my vision is sound. I know that I'm capable of becoming the person necessary to make these things happen in my life.
Well, and the reason I think that's it's personal to you, but I think that this probably applies to many, many, many people across the profession and outside the profession. And so now you went back and you told yourself, would you say the same thing to other docs who are early on a practice or going through the same thing? Or is there specific advice or action steps that you would give them? I mean, you've taken some of those steps, but to use your thought process or your one thing, what would be the action steps for the doctors who are listening in, either new doctors or just doctors maybe who have been in practice many years but still struggle with the same idea?
Yeah, I think clarity would be the first thing, right? I think most people, and again, chiropractors are just people, right? Like, you're not a special breed if you're a chiropractor. It's part of your identity. It's not all of your identity. I think when I see the conversations that are happening in the world, when I see the problems that the world is facing, they're all philosophical problems, right? Like, one of the, in chiropractic, I think there's still a giant imposter syndrome. We're trying to mimic other people, other practices. This person does it this way. This person does it this way. I think gaining clarity on what you actually want, I think would be the most important thing first. And then, if it's a vision that you are dedicated, to achieving no matter what, it's going to be okay.
Yeah. I think, that's something for sure. That's not my thing per se, but that's definitely something that, I struggled with having a big vision early on and then comparing that or where I was in that process or where that vision was comparative to other people. And of course, I only knew of their vision because of what they told me, in terms of how much of their vision they had created, what their practice looked like, what their communities looked like. I only, quote unquote, knew it because of what they said. I didn't actually know it to be true. And so then, of course, you start to... you judge yourself based through that lens.
Can I stop you for a second?
Please.
Because I think there's value in this conversation though, right? Like, so if you're starting out in a new endeavor, you're looking to the people that you value and you respect, right? Like, I'm learning how to play the guitar. Well, I got inspired to play the guitar, right? By certain guitar players. So of course I'm going to mimic them at the beginning. Right. Miles Davis said the hardest thing in music is to sound like yourself. Well, the hardest thing in life is to be yourself, but it's not wrong at the beginning of a new endeavor to be like, Jamie's, this guy's singing 1,000 and I really like what he's saying. So I'm going to do that. The problem is as you're gaining the experience, you just substitute one person for another versus, finding that spot on the inside to be like, this is my unique place in all of this.
Right. So in terms of my one thing, there's some similarities, which is, I think there probably would be a lot of similarities for people.
Sure.
I think there's probably something that's early on in many entrepreneurial journeys. But the big thing for me, I look back and I thought to myself, really it would be to just, not just it would be okay, but at the same, kind of along the same lines, to jump, right? To go for it in that sense, to know that, whether it would be okay or not, there was too much time spent thinking about things. And I'm a huge proponent of thinking and strategizing and planning. And I think that is very important, but there wasn't enough time jumping. There wasn't enough time taking action, executing and getting the job done. And that's small things, right? Wasting my time on things that weren't super important or ticking boxes just to get to-dos and cross off the list. And at the end of it, still feeling like I wasn't accomplished or not seeing the results because I wasn't doing things that were big enough or important enough, that were connected enough to what we were trying to accomplish. But then even the big things, there was lots of times where there was big opportunities and it could have been, big opportunities in terms of growing myself personally, but being afraid to do that. Big opportunities in terms of, just even things like when we added staff, right? We were talking in the both the elite and the light group last week about the one thing that we would never practice without again, and each of us basically said staff.
Yep.
Right? I mean, among all the things in practice, the one thing we decided after all this experience we've never practiced without, and we've had experiences without, is staff. And so, this idea of jumping, right? I should have just jumped and got staff from day one. I should have just jumped and found a mentor from day one. I should have just jumped and, did essentially everything that I decided to do. The sooner I did them, the faster I either would have accomplished them or failed and then moved on to the next thing.
I think the one thing, Jamie, because I really appreciated, because I read what everybody writes, especially in the groups. I really appreciated Derek Gallant's answer, which was a why, right? Mm-hmm. So I think, looking back for both of us, this is probably one of the reasons we became friends so quickly, is because we were very clear on what we wanted and why we wanted to create what we were creating from the start, right? I think that's inherent in both of our characters. That's why my step was like a self-esteem step, and your step was like, what are you waiting for, man?
Yeah. Mine was definitely a perfectionist, step of, wanting to have it all right, wanting to have it perfect, being afraid what other people would think or how it would look, or failing. Those were the issues with my self-esteem, things that were just set up inside me that were holding me back. And what's interesting is if I look back at the times when I jumped, the big ones, like moving from our first location to buying the house and the home practice, getting full-time staff or getting Atlas even, right? That jump, jumping out of that practice and selling it and coming in, opening the Life by Design Center, or jumping into the first or the second gym, or, jumping into moving to Blenheim and opening Life by Design Center, and jumping out of practice and hiring an associate. Each of those big jumps has actually been the biggest life-changing impact in my life. They've been actually the things that have impacted my life in the best way, more than anything else. And so that's the reinforcement that, man, and looking for more opportunities to jump versus being afraid of jumping, and making that cycle happen faster and faster and faster.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome.
Cool. Guys, we wanted to talk today about something really simple, because I know that a lot of you out there are in this place for yourself. It doesn't matter where you are in practice or business, but there's one thing right now that if you could go back, you would tell yourself. The homework assignment from today's podcast is to go back and actually think about that, and to then fast forward and actually tell yourself today, because the fact that you're thinking of it is probably still inherently built in today to some degree. And I know the same for me. I still struggle with the jump part. And I know, I'm sure there's parts of you that still struggle with, telling yourself it's going to be okay. And so that's the thing I want you guys to do. So go to the show notes, check those out, lifebydesignforchiropractors.com/podcast, find today's episode. And as always, Kreso, great to have you on the show.
Thanks, man. Love being here. This is fun.
Guys, Life by Design for Chiropractors, the voice of reason in chiropractic.